Hello and welcome back to a Kooky Corner of YouTube. Today I'm just going to take you through some of the stitches I use when I create my stitched pieces. I've had quite a few people ask me what stitches do you use, how do you do them? There are a whole ton of videos on YouTube about stitching and how to put things together, and I would especially recommend one to you, and that is Create and Craft with Christine, who did a whole beautiful daily stitch encyclopedia, and I will link Christine's site down below. But for I can't even get my words out. Specifically the ones that I use, there are very few. I would say there are about 7 tops, maybe 8, that I actually use on a regular basis. So I've got a very clean white piece of felt here to demonstrate on. I've got some nice pink thread so that it shows up easily, and I'll take you through some of the stitches. The first one that I use on the regular is a running stitch, and it's simply, I've just gone through my fabric, and however big you want the stitch to be, you can kind of just measure it with your needle, or you can go singularly, and it's basically just running the thread along the fabric. So it doesn't matter if they're even, you don't have to measure them, but this is the basic running stitch. And I tend to use this as a way to, I would say, just like pull all the pieces of fabric together. So when I put lots of different pieces of fabric down, I will tend to go all over the piece with this running stitch, just to kind of join them all together in some way and get them to be unified. So that's a whole row of running stitch. They're not exactly even, it's not particularly straight, but it doesn't really matter. You can be as even and as straight as you want to be. This is just like a demonstration purpose. So that's a running stitch. It looks exactly the same on the back, except that you've got the knot side on there as well. And that is how that one goes. Literally just running the stitch up and down. Now you can do this smaller. So if I turn this round, you can do smaller running stitches. So you can vary the size. And the neatness. It's just taking your needle in and out of the fabric, like so. You can go teeny weeny if you want to. And if you will find as you go along with running stitch, if you do a lot together, it will tend to give you like a ruched effect. I don't know if I've got anything close by that I can show you that on. So this part of here, you can see that nubbly effect that you get there. I've done running stitch backwards and forwards on this piece, but you can see that it kind of gives you a texture, and I really like that. I really love the way that that kind of bunches it up. It also shortens your fabric, so think about that as well. If you want to have something of a specific size, then you might want to add a little bit on to account for the ruching effect that it gives. Anyway, that's a running stitch. The other stitch I use very regularly is a simple back stitch. Now this is how I start mine off. Not everybody does it my way, but this is what I do. So I'll make one stitch, number one. So I'm anchored into the fabric. I will then go up the same distance out, so the same distance of that stitch, I will go out there and take it back, and that's where the back stitch comes in. So going out, coming back in. Make sure I've got it in the hole. It's really hard doing it on camera instead of right in front of my nose, which is where I usually have it. Like that is back stitch. Just keep taking one step back and 2 steps forward. Because you're not coming up there, you're coming up there. So it's kind of like 2 steps, isn't it, in the back. I'll show you the back in a second. So that's the front and that's the back, and you can see it's kind of overlapping at the back. So that gives you a different texture altogether, but very interesting still. And I tend to use this stitch when I am doing spirals. I can also do spirals in a running stitch, but I kind of like doing it in a back stitch because that also gives me a texture that also bumps up the fabric in a nice way, and I quite like that too. And there'll be a video of me doing a spiral on something right now. The third stitch that I use a lot is an Overo stitch or a stab stitch, or I can't think, there is another name for that as well. And this is what I use to attach my pieces on either a plique style or when I'm securing the pieces that I've already got my piece down. So for example, let's find a good one. There, you can see that. I've gone all around that, and that is in the Overo stitch to secure each of the squares down securely onto the piece. So no pun intended. I'm going to come up from the back there, and this one is you go down into the fabric and come out a little bit further along in your top piece. So this bit is going to be straight, but behind it it's going to have a diagonal. Okay, so I'll show you that a little bit more when you're going along. Now you can make this very decorative, and you can go in contrasting fabrics. So contrasting colours, I mean, on the fabric. So if I did this in a yellow, that would be making a statement of my stitching. If I want it to blend in more, then I will pick a colour that will go with the fabric more and therefore blend in. But I just go all around. So I'm going on a diagonal with my needle, coming out diagonally. But when I go in, I'm in line with that stitch. Yeah. So I'll go in, in there, and out diagonally. So yeah, lining it up, going in, coming out. And I would use that to go all around a piece. When I come to a corner, go in there and just pull it through. And then I'll start again on the other side. You can do it both ways. In, coming out diagonally. Going in, coming out diagonally. And in, coming out. On the back of your piece, you get like this diagonal line. It's like a half of a cross stitch, really. Which brings us neatly onto the next stitch I use a lot, which is a cross stitch. I'll just finish this one off, take it through. I'm going to go all the way around that piece. This is just a demonstration, Barry. Put a knot in my thread and cross stitch. Some of you may have done this before when you have done a whole piece in cross stitch. I tend to use it as a decorative element. So I'm going diagonally across and taking my needle in, coming out exactly on the straight line with that one. That makes one side, but it also brings me out to there. In line with that bit, I'm going to go in. Oh, that's my cross. And I will probably use a few of these in a piece just as a decorative element. So I'm going diagonally across from it, taking it out on the same level, so it's even Stevens with that bottom one. And I'm going to go in, across, there, like so. Let me see if I can find somewhere on here. So on here, I have done it there. So I've done a little row of 3 cross stitches. It helps if I put it on camera, doesn't it? Little row of 3 cross stitches, and that's my decorative element. If you do a cross stitch and then another cross stitch over the top of it, you end up with a star, which is quite cool also. So let's do one of those. So I'll do the cross stitch as I just shown you. Like so. Then I go in between those and come out there. I'll take it diagonally up there and out there. And you've got a little star stitch as well. So we've got a good selection there. Just those two will keep you going for quite a while with your stitching. You know, you could just do a piece with just even that. You could just use a running stitch. Running stitch will get you very far. Back stitch is a good one for getting more definition. The applique stitch, if you want to add little bits of felt or other details on, so like that, going around the edges of that, that is a good way to do that. The cross and star stitch, so that's a star stitch, that's a cross stitch. The other one I tend to use a lot is a French knot, and the French knot goes like this. So I come up through my fabric. I'm going to put this down on the table just for purposes of, makes it easier. You wrap around twice or 3 times, depending on how much you want your stitch to be, or how big you want it to be. I'm holding on to this bit, okay, because otherwise it gets tangled up. And then you've got a French knot. I'll do that again. So I'm coming up the fabric. I'm going to lay it down, wrap it around close to the fabric. So it's 1, 2, 3. Putting my thumb on the thread to hold it with a bit of tension and to keep it from tangling. And slowly does it. French knot. One more time. Coming up. Wrapping it around. So if I wanted a smaller one, I could wrap it around twice. Go back in. Holding onto my thread. And you've got a kind of a smaller French knot there. Kind of like the 3 wrap ones. Let's try a 1 wrap. Let's try a 1 wrap and see how we go. So that's once. Going back in, holding onto my thread. And that's a tiny, tiny little French knot. Very nice and decorative. And I use that on my pieces just as a decorative element, really. It's like adding a bead in, but you can do it with thread. Trying to think, that's probably a good starter for anybody who wants to just get going without being too confused with a lot of stitches. A lot of these things can get very complicated when you start going into lots of different stitches. That's not to deter you from trying as many stitches as you want. And it's really a good idea to get yourself a piece of fabric that's not important and just try them out. You can make your own little sampler as such, you know, of all the different stitches and maybe label them up. So that basically is my set of stitches, and I hope this has answered a few questions that people have had about the different ones that I use, and I've shown you them being used in a practical situation on one of my pieces. That's all from me for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm sorry about the wobbly camera. I am on the wobbly desk again. I have 2 desks in this room, and this one has got kind of like a wobbly cam, and the other one's a bit more stable, but this one was the clearest one. That's total honesty. This is the clearest desk. The other is filled with paint and pens. Have a great day. I'll be back here soon with something else. See you soon. Bye bye.